how real is the Davante Adams to New York Jets possibility?
I just have a hard time seeing the Raiders unload Adams. Jets don't have their second-round pick next year as of right now, and it probably becomes a first-round pick if Rodgers plays a specific amount of snaps. So you can't really trade your first or your second next year right now.
All right, we got yet another very special guest returning to the podcast, NFL Insider and friend of the Caps Off podcast, Ari Meirov. Welcome back, Ari.
One of the fellas.
One of the fellas. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back on. I mean, I was telling you guys this before we started. Last time I was on, not much was going on in the NFL. Now we have news going on every day. So, like, football season is here. It's awesome.
Fucking back.
It's here.
I'm so excited. Look at the smiles on everyone's
Dude,
faces.
so
Look
I
at this.
can't wait to watch backups play all weekend, man. It's gonna be special.
We had Trey Wingo on the pod a couple weeks ago, and he said, he was like, "Man, you guys have been scraping the bottom of the barrel for content." We were drafting like a bunch of like stupid stuff, like favorite snack foods. Like
he was telling us, he's like, what are you guys gonna do? Draft like favorite types of butter next?
In fairness, the bottom of the barrel has worked great for us. So we've been thriving and jiving.
It's been a good offseason for our content for sure, but definitely the content will thrive come NFL season.
We actually talk about what this pod is about,
which is just a month away. So we're gonna get right into it. So obviously some exciting things have happened in the last couple weeks since we last talked to you, Ari.
Throwing dots, I know.
So our first question is related to last time I think we talked about running back contracts.
Absolutely.
There's one big name running back in particular who has not gotten paid and is no longer on a roster even, right? Is he?
No, well, he's technically,
is he technically on the roster still?
He's on the pup.
But he wants out. He wants out. So Jonathan Taylor is not currently active for the Colts. So Ari, is there anything you could tell us about Jonathan Taylor? Where is Jonathan Taylor going to go? Is he going to go anywhere? Will he be playing in this 2023 NFL season?
Why is it the Dolphins?
Stop.
Yeah, I mean, so he's still rehabbing his ankle injury that he suffered last year. And sometimes when players want new contracts, they pretend to have some injury so they don't have to be on the field. But the ankle stuff does sound to be like a real thing that he can't really be on the field. But there are so many angles to this, and we've talked about the running back situation for last time we were on, and it's been a discussion for months now in the NFL. Saquon didn't get paid. Josh Jacobs didn't get paid. Taylor wants to get paid after year 3 because he knows that the shelf life for running backs isn't that long. And he realized that last year when he got injured after having a year where he was an MVP candidate going over 2,000 scrimmage yards. So he wants to get paid. And I've been surprised just how public this thing has become, because when you think about it from a football perspective as a fan, you just drafted Anthony Richardson. He's on a rookie contract. Mm-hmm. You want him to have as many weapons as possible, and Taylor is an exceptional weapon. So why not pay him? But I've been just surprised at how public this has become, and no one really has brought it up in the media, to be honest. And I think it should be mentioned. But the owner in Indianapolis, Jim Irsay, who has been very public and been the one really riding the ship over here and creating the whole drama, over the last year and a half, he's just really taken over a little bit of that organization. And as a GM, which is Chris Ballard in Indianapolis, you want an owner who isn't going to really meddle with what you do. And if you look at the last year and a half, he forced Carson Wentz to get traded. He benched Matt Ryan. He fired Frank Reich. He hired Jeff Saturday. Yep. He wanted to keep Jeff Saturday for this year as well. And now he's controlling this JT stuff. And as a GM, Chris Ballard is very respected, and he's tries to make sure there's no leaks in the building and no one really knows of their plans. And now you have an owner here who's kind of controlling everything and making it a whole public feud, which of course is not what they want. So it's quieted down for now. And I'm sure that the front office would have preferred for this to stay quiet and not become a whole thing, but it has. And Taylor, I mentioned this last time, he switched agents to a guy named Malky Kala, who's an interesting guy, but he has some big-time clients. He has Shaquille Leonard. He has David Njoku, but he's more known for his MMA stuff. He's a big MMA agent, and he has like Jorge Masvidal, and he has John Jones. And the way he's handling this is it's as if he's like negotiating with Dana White. So it's like it's an MMA type of thing. So it's like it's fun to follow in the media, but the Colts prefer this to be way more private. And I think it's starting to become more private, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Hey, alcohol is one hell of a drug. Jim Irsay is going.
I would say Jim Irsay is off his rocker the last year.
What are they telling him in Alcoholics Anonymous?
You mentioned JT's injury. Like, how legit is that? I know he tweeted responding to it saying that he's not injured.
Back
well, he's talking about the ankle.
He's talking about his ankle from last year.
Is that what he was responding to? The back?
No. Jonathan Taylor was responding to him having a back injury, which is what Jim Irsay allegedly had said, which is why they were going to put him on the NFL NFPI list or whatever.
It's the
PUP.
It's not the PUP. It's
NFI. I don't know.
NFI.
It's basically a non-football injury. If you suffer an injury away from the team, and the Colts said he had a back injury where he suffered away from the team, you would have the right not to pay him. So that was what was going on. But the ankle injury happened last year while he was playing. So that's why he's on the PUP list.
Like Jason Pierre-Paul was like an NFI.
Yeah, that's an NFI.
Well, that's a
non-football injury.
But how legit is the potential of Jonathan Taylor being traded? Like, is that an actual thing that could happen, or do we see him, no matter what, running it back with the Colts?
No pun intended.
Well, I'm not going to rule it out, but the thing is, and we've seen this really like this offseason, for example, Austin Eckler was available for trade, and nobody wanted him. No one was going to give up a pick plus the contract for a running back, a position that no one really wants to pay right now. So the difference here is that Taylor is 24 years old. He still has a lot of tread left in that tire, you would assume. So I would imagine that there would be teams who would be interested, but the Colts would also say, we probably want a second-round pick or a first-round pick, and no team is doing that. So the way the Colts are handling this is like, we value him in a trade, but we don't value him in a contract. So it's like, which one is it, right? So it's a complicated thing. So I would be shocked if they trade him. I think they're a way better team with him than without him. But if the agent and the player are going to continue to make noise and make it super uncomfortable, does it get to a point where they're like, we don't have a choice here if we're not going to pay him? So that's the interesting part out of all of it.
You know who the biggest winner is out of this whole Jim Irsay being off his rocker and just loud as shit? The Dallas Cowboys, because finally Jerry Jones is not in the limelight. The Cowboys will win the Super Bowl. Confirmation 2023.
All right.
Sure.
Yeah. The last question on the Jonathan Taylor situation. I think you raised the Austin Eckler point, but I feel like Jonathan Taylor is a guy that someone would give up a pick for, knowing what his contract and cap hit is this year, also knowing how young he is. How valid can forcing your way out get in the NFL? Obviously, you mentioned the agent, and I've seen on Twitter the agent's been liking a lot of different tweets, especially when it comes to going to other teams. Like, can it get real in terms of Jonathan Taylor being able to force his way out?
Well, I'm trying to remember the last player who really forced his way out, and the last one I can remember was Antonio Brown in Pittsburgh, where he also went rogue and was throwing footballs and kicking stuff and leaving. Like, if you're going to go to that level, then maybe it could happen, but the team could also find you and put you on a list where, you didn't show up or whatever, and make it, the Colts have been showing their hand a little bit. I think it's Jim Irsay, not Chris Ballard, but they're willing to play hardball in all of this. So if you're going to play hard, we'll go right back at you. And if that's the case, the team has more leverage than the player because he has a year left on the rookie contract, a very cheap contract, and then they could franchise tag him 2 more years after that. So the team has way more leverage. I just don't know if Taylor is going to be the type of guy who's going to do that. Up until now, everyone has said, like, in the locker room, he's been a team first guy. And then all of a sudden this year he showed up and it's just changed. And I think the reason it's changed is because he wants a contract. So he's making a little bit of a fuss. But if it gets to that point, if the Colts are willing to play hardball, they have more leverage than the player in this situation.
What running backs do you think could be traded in the middle of the season? Do you think Jonathan Taylor might happen to him in the mid-season, or do you think it'll happen before then? Or what other running backs do you think could be traded mid-season?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because last year was a year where we had so many running back trades. Off the top of my head, I remember Christian McCaffrey was traded, obviously. Jeff Wilson ended up in Miami. James Robinson to the Jets was a big deal. Who else was there? There were a couple of more. Naheem Hines to Buffalo, Zach Moss to Indy. So there were a lot of running back trades last year. It's going to be interesting to see which one happens this year. I think Taylor is interesting for sure. Like if the Colts start off the season not great and he's still making a fuss and Shane Steichen, the new head coach, wants to set a culture and this guy's ruining it, do we just trade him? I think that makes sense. There are some other names out there who are interesting. I don't think it's ever going to happen, but the Titans and Derrick Henry, if they start off really bad that. He has 1 year left on his contract year. If you're sitting at 2-4, do you just blow it up or not? I don't sense that's the type of thing that Mike Vrabel would do, but that's an interesting one. And then there are some smaller running backs. I mean, the Falcons have so many running backs on their roster now with Bijan and Algier and Cordell Patterson.
Yeah.
Do you move on from maybe a Patterson at some point? So those are the type of players that I'll be looking at. But we mentioned this last time. This year's trade deadline, because there are two really good quarterbacks in next year's draft with Caleb Williams and Drake May. If there are teams in the NFL who start off slow and are like 1-5, 1-6, do they just trade all their pieces just to get more draft picks like the Panthers did last year, and then eventually try to get that quarterback in the draft where your fortunes could change for years to come?
The Rams or the Bucks.
I mean, what teams, like, based on that, do you see having like a mid-season fire sale? Like, we talked yesterday actually about the Rams a little bit, or the Bucks,
Buccaneers,
Cardinals come to mind for it. Like, what teams do you think are most likely to just sell every single player that they got, basically, to get draft capital this year?
Yeah, I mean, I've wondered a lot about the Rams as of late because, like, it's such a funny team where you made the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and now it's like literally like Stafford, Kupp, Donald, McVay, and who the heck is the rest of this roster? Like, it's hilarious. There's like 30 rookies on that roster, a bunch of undrafted free agents, and I think their plan this year is really they're gonna try to be competitive, but I wouldn't be surprised if they realize midway through, like, you know what, let's move on from some pieces. And if they have a first round pick next year for the first time in forever.
Yeah.
So like if they could be that team, where we're picking 1, 2, or 3, and we could get our future franchise quarterback, then it makes some sense to me. I mean, that would be Sean McVay really strongly considered leaving this year. So he came back knowing they're not winning this year. He's staying here for the long haul to try to build this up once again. And I don't really think Matthew Stafford has that many years left. I mean, the trade stuff, they could say it's not true, but they definitely at least looked into it because last year was a tough year for Stafford. He had a concussion, he had a spinal thing. He considered retirement himself, but if he did, then he would have lost a lot of money. So there's an element there where he's not going to be here for 3-4 years. So you might need a new quarterback. So that team makes sense. Tampa Bay makes sense. Obviously, Arizona is an interesting team as well with 2 first-round picks this year, and Kyler could be traded next year with that contract. So those are obviously some teams. I'm trying to think of a couple of other. Tennessee is interesting. They've kind of went back all in after signing DeAndre Hopkins, but that roster, like they tore it down by cutting like Taylor Lewan and Robert Woods and Zach Cunningham, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, let's just bring some more guys back in with Hopkins or whatever. So that's an interesting team as well. Yeah, they're like in the middle right now. So which way are they going to be by the trade deadline?
Well, you bring up the deadline, and Jack was obviously mentioning it. A big name that could be moved at the deadline is obviously Davante Adams. Now, Aaron Rodgers is a guy that took a $35 million pay cut. And the reason that he said I took a pay cut was because if someone comes available at the deadline, I'd like us to be able to go out and get them. How real is the Davante Adams to New York Jets possibility?
Yeah, I've seen some of that talk. It's very interesting. First of all, I'm still floored by Rodgers taking a $35 million
he's all in.
Actual pay cut.
Yeah.
Like it's not a restructure. He's like actually giving money back. It's like
awesome.
It's like unheard of what he did.
What a legend.
So yeah, but now there's like legit pressure for the Jets and their GM Joe Douglas and the rest of the front office to actually bring guys in now. Like, you know what I mean? It's not like Green Bay where it's like, oh, we were interested in Odell, but he went to the Rams. We were interested in this guy, but he went somewhere else. Like, you guys have to actually bring people in now.
Yeah.
So I don't know which players it's going to be. Every year there are players available to trade that line. Last year there were so many with McCaffrey and Hawkinson and Claypool and whatever. So like there are going to be guys available. I just have a hard time seeing the Raiders unload Adams. Like maybe we've seen some of the stuff that Adams has posted on Instagram, and he did an article where he kind of mentioned he wasn't aligned with the front office. So maybe he creates a bit of a fuss, and maybe they start the year 2-5 and he's like, get me out of here. And the Jets step up and do it. But it's probably also worth mentioning the Jets don't have their second round pick next year as of right now, and it probably becomes a first round pick if Rodgers plays a specific amount of snaps. So you can't really trade your first or your second next year right now, unless the Raiders are okay with taking whichever one it ends up being, which I don't know why they would do that. So I think you should probably keep that in mind as well.
Dude, Rodgers just like went to the Jets and now like realizes he has like full control of everything.
Yeah.
So he could just win a Super Bowl. He's like, let me just tinker around with this team and just get as many players that I like as I can.
He just wants all the old Packers guys.
It's so
but him, Davante in New York.
That'd be
insane.
Oh my
Cooper Kupp could be available at the deadline too.
Oh, Cooper Kupp.
Oh
I
my
mean,
God.
I'm not saying anything, but
That's more realistic, probably. If the
Ari-
Rams go like 1-5, like he said,
Yeah.
and they're like, fuck this.
that's more
He's
realistic.
30. He's 30 years old.
Yeah.
He'd go win the second Super Bowl in New York, man.
That would be crazy. Ari, obviously training camp is in full swing. It's done now. Is this the last week, or is there there's a
training
couple
camp's-
more weeks?
Yeah,
we have
I never
got time.
I don't know
We're
how
just
long
getting
Yeah, we got time.
Is it just
Up until the
started?
season.
Preseason week 1
Does it
just
go
happened,
until
brother.
like there's not a week between? They don't get a week off?
No, it's
breaks?
summer camp with a lot of
All
training.
right. Well, obviously training camp is in full swing. So I'm curious, is there any news from training camp that people don't know about that like you insiders are talking about with each other, or like things that might be going on that might be exciting for fans to hear?
that we should know and start stupid narratives about.
Well, there's not a lot that actually could be said, to be honest.
Yeah.
The one thing that I am super interested in, and I think the public perception on it and the behind the scenes perception on it is so different, is like the Dalvin Cook stuff, where it's like he's a free agent, and I think everyone is saying Jets, Dolphins. It's such an interesting situation because I feel like there are multiple teams in the AFC East who are all looking for running backs, and it's like that Spider-Man meme where everyone is like looking at each other, like which one moves first. Who's going to sign a running back first, right? Zeke with the Patriots, Cook with the Dolphins and Jets. The Bills have sniffed around as well, and it's like who's going to do it first, and they're all trying to just wait to see what happens. I just don't know what's going to happen with Cook because I kind of get this sense that the Jets feel, I'm not sure if this is true, but I feel like they think they're being used as leverage for the Dolphins. And they also feel like when Cook came to visit them, there was a part of it where he came on a Sunday when it was an open practice, when the Hard Knocks cameras were on, and they all walked in with their agency T-shirts on, and they're all like, we'll be on Hard Knocks now, and the fans are going to be chanting his name. There's a part of it where he might be trying to build a fan base to put some pressure on the front office. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm wondering about as well, because I don't think the Breece Hall is progressing well from his injury. He should be ready for week 1. And I don't think the Jets are looking at Dalvin Cook as a necessity, but more as a luxury for them. So they're not looking at this like we want to pay someone $8-9 million to come in and just play with Breece Hall. We just want someone to be there as well, just in case of a worst case scenario, or help us out in those week 1, 2, and 3 where we're playing Buffalo, Dallas, New England, Kansas City to start the year. So that's part of it. I think that people don't realize that he's looking for a legitimate contract, and I'm just not sure exactly if it's actually like the Jets truly want him, and if Dalvin truly wants them, and if he's just using them for leverage because he wants to end up in his hometown of Miami.
I didn't even realize that. Like, obviously, it was during training camp, but that the Hard Knock cameras
Knocks,
were
Oh,
on
so-
when Dalvin went.
It was
That's
all
so
applause.
So we're gonna
staged,
see
just,
Dalvin Cook in the Hard Knocks, is what we're
On
saying.
the
I just wanna
LAA.
say- I just want to say one more thing about it. So Hard Knocks is tonight. I don't know when this is dropping, but it's coming up tonight. The Jets have control over what goes in. I am super curious to know if the Dalvin Cook stuff ends up going in or not, because the Jets have control over it. And if they felt like they're just being used to be on Hard Knocks, they could have just said like, "Don't put that in." So that's something I am watching tonight.
Oh,
I'm watching for that.
Do you know if any other teams had that kind of control before? Like, or because I feel like HBO usually has the say.
No, every team has control over what goes in.
Okay.
Every team has control over what goes in. Same thing with the quarterback series, by the way. The quarterbacks involved could tell them not to put it in. So they have to run it by them before putting it in.
Okay.
Well, let's
I
go
wasn't sure if
into.
it was like a
I'm
full
curious to
freedom.
go into that. Do you have any ideas about which quarterbacks will be on quarterback? Obviously, I feel like it's come out that there's a ton, and you're smiling as I said, so there's a chance that he knows
some shit.
But obviously, all these quarterbacks have said, "Oh, we turned it down, and then it came out that it was like all these quarterbacks are supposed to say they turned it down to build up this hype. So could we play a little hangman maybe to find out which quarterbacks are going to be on if you know? Maybe something. I mean, what do you know about quarterback?
I'll be transparent. I don't know who's going to be on it, but I do think you're right that all these quarterbacks were told do not say that you've committed to it, just because we want it to be a element of surprise. And also we don't want that to be a storyline throughout the season where the reporters are going to ask you, oh, you know, like what's going on over here? How was it this week? Is it difficult to have the cameras in your house while all this is going on? So they want to keep that behind the scenes. So I don't know exactly what's going on and who was picked, but I do get a sense that all these quarterbacks were told to say nothing about it or just say, hey, we're not doing it. And then eventually in October, November, when the league announces it, we'll just all be surprised. Like, oh, wait, I thought he said he's not doing it. Now he is. So
Joe Burrow's doing it. Let's be real. We
like
know Burrow's doing it.
I feel like we all talked about it earlier, like about who the 3 quarterbacks we would want to be on. What 3 quarterbacks would you want on quarterback season 2?
Good
Yeah,
question.
so I liked the structure they did last year where I don't know if they purposely did this, but it was superstar and then like above average and then
It's got to be on
backup slash
purpose.
starter type of role. Yeah, it probably was.
Yeah.
But
I like that.
so yeah, so I liked that setup and I do like the Joe Burrow element, especially now with the injury. I would love to see the behind the scenes of all that going on. I like the Burrow part. I would love to have a rookie on, whether it's Stroud, Young, or Richardson. I think one of those three.
So fun.
Seeing a rookie quarterback in his first year and how all that goes through, that would be fun. And then the middle tier quarterback, I mean, I like Derek Carr in New Orleans. I think that's an interesting
Cool, yeah,
one.
new scenery.
A new team. Who else will move this offseason? But Jimmy Garoppolo in Las Vegas is an interesting one.
I would
Vegas
like to
Jimmy.
see
those
that.
type of players.
I would genuinely like to see that.
Yeah.
Why is that, Adam?
Because he's a handsome face. You
Yeah,
know, it's
he
a
is.
good person to look at. You know.
Him and Joe Burrow in the same season.
Oh my
Oh,
God,
man.
we're talking.
You're
good
talking
looks
ratings
and
through the
moxie.
roof.
Hunks. Yeah.
Then put Jalen Hurts there too, and you're just whoo.
Oh God, let's just make
Jalen
it
Hurts would be
handsome.
fun,
Let's just pick
actually.
the most
Yeah, he's
handsome
dope.
people
Jalen
to
Hurts
make a
would be
series about.
Jalen
There
Hurts
you
would
go.
be really
Call
fun.
it handsome. We touched on it earlier about holdouts. Well, Jonathan Taylor's not really holding out, but Zach Martin's a guy that's holding out with the Cowboys. Are there some major holdouts that you're looking at where it's like it could get really bad, or are we just looking at the Zach Martin situation of a leverage play and it'll get resolved?
Yeah, so there are 3 holdouts right now, and it's rare for holdouts to happen ever since the new CBA happened because the fines are legit and they cannot be forgiven. So every day they're not showing up as 50K out of their paycheck, and it's going to eventually reach $1 million at this rate. So that's happening right now. It's Chris Jones, Nick Bosa, Zach Martin. I would expect Bosa to become the highest paid defensive player in NFL history. That deal is going to get done, but his agent is a very tough one, and he has told him not to show up, like he almost did of Joey Bosa, his brother, but they got a deal done a day before training camp. But I do think that contract is very complex. It's very deep. It's going to be 30+ million per year, but they're working on it, and the 49ers have been budgeting for it for a number of years now, knowing it's going to be really, really expensive. Chris Jones is interesting because the defensive tackle market has exploded this offseason, but there's like a big gap between 1 and 2. Aaron Donald is at 30+ million, and Quentin Williams is at 24. And the other players who are paid, like Dexter Lawrence, Deron Payne, are also right underneath that. And Chris Jones is like, I don't want to be paid where number 2 is. I want to be close to number 1. And the Chiefs are like, nah, we think you might be closer to down there. So they're trying to figure that out right now. But he's like a massive part of that defense. Like they need him to succeed on defense. So I would imagine that one also gets done. The Zach Martin one is by far the most interesting one to me. I know it's an offensive lineman. It's not a fun position, but I frankly don't understand why the Cowboys are acting the way they are because he got an extension in 2018 and he has still been the best guard arguably in football ever since. And if you look at that division, that's Dexter Lawrence, that's Deron Payne, that's Jonathan Allen, that's Fletcher Cox, that's Jordan Davis. Like if you want to be where you're at this year, you need Zach Martin. And he's getting paid $13 million this year. The highest paid guard is at $20 million. So the market has exploded ever since. And he has no guaranteed money next year either. So he deserves a pay raise or some guaranteed money to be added in there. And the Cowboys are acting like, nah, we're fine with it. And it just doesn't really make much sense to me. So that one is just super interesting because I don't think the Cowboys can get where they want to this year. And Felipe, you could talk more about this as the Cowboys fan, but I just don't think that they could get where they are this year with Zach Martin not being in that offensive line.
I totally agree, and I think it's kind of weird with how the Cowboys stance on this because they did just give Malik Hooker an extension, and that was kind of what a lot of Cowboy fans were looking at. Like, oh, okay, this is clearly a principle thing. Then, like, if they're not going to pay. If you're paying Malik Hooker, you give him an extension, and he's a good player, and he's been playing well.
There's no Zach Martin.
But Zach Martin's the
Zach
best in his
Martin?
position. Yeah, and he obviously more crucial to your success probably. So yeah, it's an interesting situation.
It's just weird, man.
Ari, I want to ask you one more question, and then we're gonna wrap up. But obviously, the NFL top 100 players came out this week, and the top 10 came out last night.
Sucks.
So we spent the first half of our podcast before you
Except for
came
number
on,
4.
going through it, breaking it down, saying
Very calm-headed.
saying where our
not-
qualms were. It got heated for sure. And we did our own re-ranking of the top 10. But I'm curious, what are your initial reactions to the NFL top 100 players list?
Yeah, I mean, I always find the list to be funny, and I think the reason it gets so much attention is because apparently the players vote on it, and a lot of players just don't care; they just put their own teammates, and that's it. So the whole voting system is kind of broken, but whatever, it is what it is. And the NFL does a good job of producing the whole thing, so it's fun to watch. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I just didn't love it. If I'm being honest with you, like Patrick Mahomes, the number one is right, and then after that, like I was on here last time. I'm high on Jalen Hurts. I say he's the third best quarterback in the NFL, I think, and they put him as the third best player in the league, which is interesting. Like I don't know if I'm putting him over Burrow, and then I don't know. If you ask me if I'm starting a franchise right now, which one would I prefer, Justin Jefferson or a Nick Bosa? I don't know which one would you guys say, but I kind of would lean to Nick Bosa.
Yeah.
So whatever. There's whatever. There's a lot of different things. Josh Jacobs at number 12. I love Josh Jacobs. I don't think he's the 12th best player in football. What else was on there? Trent Williams is the best offensive tackle in football, hands down. He should be like a top 7 player in all of this.
Yeah.
Like he's awesome. So whatever, there's a lot of different things here that I just don't get, but also I just don't know how the whole voting system even works. I don't know how they ended up with these numbers. So it is what it is. It's a fun thing to watch. I think people take it way too seriously, if I'm being honest. But it's fun. It's what matters is they got Patrick Mahomes right. There was one year where they just I don't remember what it was, but I think Lamar Jackson was the best quarterback in the league they put over Mahomes, and it just made no sense. So and I love Lamar.
It depends on the year.
I think recency bias. After that year, I think you can't take it that seriously. Like after we saw, I think Patrick Mahomes was 4 that year. It wasn't only that like Lamar was better than him. Patrick Mahomes was the 4th best player.
First year, right?
Not after like his second year.
So Mahomes took it. Mahomes took it as motivation though. Like he put like I think he tweeted like a notepad after that came out. Then he won the Super Bowl, and I was like, "Yep, that's
cool." What a legend, man! I love that they see this shit and they react to it like that as well.
Some of these, this
take it to heart.
Crazy.
Yeah, no, we definitely also took it way too seriously, but we're just like the casual fans. So
what happens.
So that's they. You said it. Like the NFL does an amazing job of producing
the fact
the whole
that Josh
thing.
Jacobs was ranked above Trent Williams,
the fact that
and
Tony
Davante Adams, I'm
Pollard-
like, what in the world?
And that Tony
Christian
Pollard got into the
McCaffrey?
top 55 is crazy.
Backup running back.
Absurd. Well, Ari, that's all the time we got for today. We'll have to have you back on again when we have actual football being played. It's always a pleasure to see you and have you on. So thanks again for coming on, man.
Yep. Thanks for having me on. Keep crushing it. And we're a month away, guys. A month away from
football.
So close. Starting real football.
So damn close.
It's going to be awesome.
It is. All right. Thanks, Ari.
Thanks, Ari.
And thanks for listening to the Caps Off podcast. We'll see you next time. Peace.
See ya.
All right, Matan, what was your favorite thing that Ari said?
That the Giants are the best team in the world.
He didn't say that. In all seriousness, the Hot 100?
He meant to, though, right?
No.
Okay.
Didn't.
NFL 100 list sucked.
I called it the Hot 100.
Yeah, the NFL Hot 100 sucked. Anyway, subscribe. Subscribe to the Caps Off podcast here below. Bell right here below. Bing, bing, bing. Click it, please. And
also, check out My Sports Update on Twitter. Ari Meirov, friend of the pod,
Damn
and
right.
the GOAT. So definitely make sure to check him out. Also, when we get to 20K subscribers, do you know what Jack's going to do?
Tua tattoo?
Yeah, he said he's getting a Tua tattoo. He's
Tua
going to actually get the
tattoo.
full sleeve. So
Tua tattoo.
share with your friends, please.
Bye.